That's why we love what we do.
Also, why the Chargers were hard to find.
Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about that tonight. So we're going to start with Knight Rider, because Knight Rider is sort of like the first really big, definite car show in this whole genre, I think.
Yeah, I'll let you guys talk about the show a little bit if you want. Of course, we all know the plot. A guy is almost killed, and he wakes up with another face, and they let him become part of this secret, independently funded organization with this special car that talks back to him to fight crime, you know, in the, I guess Southern California and the far west, somewhere around Vegas.
This show was created by Glenn Larson, and you'll hear his name quite a bit tonight. I've tried to kind of group some of these key creators. You're going to hear Glenn Larson and Stephen J. Cannell a lot tonight, throwing that sheet of typewriter paper. The show ran for from 1982 to 1986, and then of course there were subsequent spin-offs, but those don't count. And the show, well,
I can take it if you want me to run with it.
Go.
So to give you a little info on the car itself, the car was a customized 1982 Pontiac Trans Am, although there were also Firebirds that were used on occasion.
It was so I saw this on a show that we're going to talk about in a minute. It was a 1982, 83, or 84 Firebird or Trans Am.
Right.
All are accurate.
Right.
So
That's a heck of a sentence right there.
The first car cost $100,000 to customize for the show. From my notes, we can have dueling notes if you want.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Okay, so from my notes, a total of 23 of these cars were made during the shows. I believe it was a 5-season run.
Yep.
And all except one of these cars survived until the show was axed. All except 5 of the remaining 22 cars were destroyed at the end of filming. So there are 5 left in the world.
Yeah, there are 5 now. Just to sort of show you, that's a base Trans Am, a 1982 Trans Am, and that's kit, of course. You can kind of see where they just sort of pop on a thing over the headlights, down below the headlights, to sort of extend the hood, and otherwise the paint job and some of the interior stuff, it's pretty much a Trans Am. I just really quickly want to show you Glenn Larson and talk about him really quickly. He has had a lot of criticism. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with this, but he has been accused of stealing ideas from other shows. So Harlan Ellison once referred to him as Glenn Larceny. James Garner is not a fan of Glenn Larson and got really mad at him for some of those ideas. And there's been some legal issues, but he did create was associated with a lot of really cool, just very 80s properties that we're going to talk about tonight. I just wanted to put this in here. This is Carr, who was voiced, of course, by Peter Cullen, at least initially. And it's just kind of basically the same car, but with a slightly different paint job.
It's two-tone kit.
Yeah. So this is one thing I wanted to point out to you guys. How many of you guys have seen this Jay Leno's Garage? Yeah. So Joe Huth, who is the gentleman in the middle, I think that's how you say his name. That's how Jay said it. He is KnightRiderHistorians.com, and he owns one of the last 5 remaining kits. The gentleman next to him is his friend and owns another one. So
that's Jay Leno.
The two, no, not him.
Okay.
The bald gentleman. Thank you. But no, the two of them own the cars, and they're very, very knowledgeable about them. And a lot of times, I don't know if any of you own a classic car or a film car that's related to anything like that, but you learn a lot about it just from owning one, because no one can work on classic cars. So you have to learn how to do a lot of the stuff yourself. And so the thing about this show that's really frustrating, though, is that Jay Leno is kind of a jerk to these guys, in my opinion, and it's just really uncomfortable, but I highly recommend you watch it if you like to get frustrated, because he does that thing where he's just constantly messaging to the audience that he's way too cool to know about this show, and kind of making fun of them and saying, so you guys are probably both single, right? And it's like, yeah, we've heard these jokes, Jay. Come on. How many women are in this audience tonight? And, like, we all love this stuff too, right? So I'm just saying. So the guy Joe Huth actually wrote this book, Knight Rider Legacy. So he's very knowledgeable about the series, and that's him with his kit car on his website. So I just kind of wanted to give him a shout out. This guy and a bunch of other people, actually, there is a huge Knight Rider convention here in Atlanta. Does everybody know that? Southern Knights, like with a K? And yeah, so they have a lot of the cars come down. They bring their cars, they trailer them up and bring them down here. And you'll have to go online to see exactly when it is, but I believe it's in Duluth. No. That's the Dukes of Hazzard convention.
I was really hoping that this would go a little further before the audience turned on everybody.
No, it's not that kind of night, but it's a cool. It's in Duluth, and it seems like a really cool convention. Although I don't think it has a huge amount of people, but I think we can change that tonight. We can just all learn about it and go check it out.
Now, the merchandising for Knight Rider was prolific because kids were just as interested in this show as the adults, probably more so. Kenner Toys had the license for it, and they did the famous talking Knight Rider car, the big one on the lower right. I point this out because for a lot of you who may not know about the ins and outs of old toy technology, if you push down on the license plate on the back, Kit would talk a series of set phrases, kind of like Woody's pull string. You never know which one you were going to get. And the actual mechanism inside was a tiny plastic record player. And it would select randomly the sound bite that it would use. And so obviously those things can wear out. But and then, of course, you had the Diecast Cars as well. What you're going to be seeing a lot in this presentation when we get to these slides are Diecast Cars and model kits, just letting you know. So I hope you enjoy those.
So Magnum PI was one of my favorite shows as a little kid, and that's weird, but it was, like, as a kid, like a little kid. I guess I just thought he was the coolest, and that car was really cool. We have 2 Magnums here right now, like right here in the room, so thank you guys for coming out. But yeah, this was another Glenn Larson production, and it was using a... What?
Yeah, it was a Ferrari 308 GTS. There were a number of different versions of the 308 used throughout the run of the show. The show ran 8 seasons. The funny part about this show, there were a few funny parts around the car. One is they wanted to get the cars directly from Ferrari. They reached out. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not correct. I'm mixing that up with another show. They wanted a Porsche. They wanted to get a car from Porsche because they wanted a Porsche. And Porsche said... they weren't going to customize the car to the needs of the production. They weren't going to provide them with the car they wanted. So they decided, well, we'll just go out and buy these Ferrari 308s ourselves. And then, Tom Selleck is 6'4". This car does not really accommodate a man who's 6'4", or any life form that's 6'4". So they took the seat pad out of the driver's seat, and he's basically sitting on the floorboard, and his head is still coming up over the roof line. So you'll notice...
So what you're saying is he's basically wearing a car.
He's wearing a car. So you'll notice in most
so you're on point.
Yeah, you'll notice in most of the episodes they always drive with the top off, because very rarely do they put the top on, because Tom Selleck could not get in the car. I mean, it was so his head is over the windshield most of the time.
In the first season, the Ferrari was a 1978 308 GTS. For the second and third seasons, it was a 1980 308 GTSI, because I'm not a car person, so all of you car people, I'm just reading.
Can everybody hear her okay? You good? Okay.
And for the rest of the series, it was a 1984 308 GTSI Quattro Valvo. Something.
We are not Italian, so you could just
I
forgive
did the
us.
best I could, but all
I think
of
that's a kind of rodent.
Probably. Like Michael said, the Ferraris had to be made to accommodate Tom, because Tom's special and tall. They were all auctioned off when the series ended in 1988. Larry Minetti bought one of the early ones that was Rick in the show. and he reportedly still owns it. Some of the others, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but one of the others went to a place called Cars of the Stars Motor Museum in Keswick, Cumbria, England. And so if you look it up online, it'll tell you that there is this museum called Cars of the Stars. But if you look up Cars of the Stars Museum, you'll find that it was closed, and I'll tell you all about that in a minute. But first, let's go to...
No, we're going to talk about the merchandising
Oh,
first.
you're going to talk about the merchandising.
The merchandising for this, there were toys for Magnum PI. Kidco did the Diecast Hot Wheel size car. And then LJN, the hated video game company of the 80s, they did a action figure and car set, like a G.I. Joe style Tom Selleck size, with a very ugly looking rendition, cheap looking rendition of the 308. It is extremely valuable today. You cannot get this thing with the box for less than $2,000 if you're lucky, probably more. And we had a picture of it, but I guess we
It'll
don't
probably show up later in the presentation, so we'll keep our eyes open for that.
It's so fast, it just got ahead of us.
It was so valuable that it just...
We might have sold it.
They think I'm funny. For now. Yeah. So the notes on my slide says, Michael knows this, so...
Your slide isn't wrong.
So everybody knows, you probably know that the original idea for Back to the Future script was that it was going to be a refrigerator that traveled through time. And then somebody wisened up and said, we do not want kids hopping into old refrigerators.
Did they see that episode of Punky Brewster? I mean...
So then they said, well, we need a mobile vehicle, probably would be better. And we have this, then they wrote this gag about people in the past thinking that the vehicle in question looked like a spaceship. And they said, what car looks the most like a spaceship? And the recently defunct Delorean Motor Company's car, the DMC-12, looked very much like a spaceship.
So were they able to get a deal on those cars? Because
no, I think they just went out and they probably did get a deal on them, but not from DeLorean himself. They probably got them from dealerships just trying to get rid of them, if you know the story behind DeLorean back then. Now, the funny part about this is that even in 1985, so the DeLorean was a 1981 to 83 model car, with the 83s being built in receivership in Canada. The 81s and 82s were built in Northern Ireland and then shipped over. We're only 2 years out from the final DeLoreans that were built, right? 85. And already the production team was having problems keeping these cars running during Back to the Future. They were constantly breaking down, according to Bob Gale. It was like cold nights in California on the back lot, because it gets real cold there at night, or at least it used to. And so they would have like hair dryers on the struts for the gull wing doors to try and keep them up so they wouldn't sink between takes,
It's like a blackbird.
Yeah, exactly.
he has a question.
Yeah.
That actually makes the film a little bit more understandable now when he's banging his head on the steering wheel trying to get it to start.
Exactly. Yeah. I won't go into too many details because I know we got so many cool cars to talk about, but it's funny you bring that up because the fuel delivery system in this car is the Betamax of auto fuel delivery. It is this lost technology that just doesn't even, they don't even have it anymore. We went from carburetors to EFI, but nobody realizes that there in the middle, in the dark times around the DeLorean's existence, was Bosch K-Jetronic mechanical fuel injection. And it literally looks like a rubber octopus sitting over your engine. Anyway, it's horrible.
So do you want to tell the people how you know that?
Just go to the next slide.
I really didn't mean anything other than you have a DeLorean.
Okay, well, that's fine.
You're being awfully defensive about this.
So Michael has a DeLorean, and that's why we're dating.
Wow.
All right, Michael! Blaze the cars! I knew it was true.
Apparently going full bore geek can actually have benefits.
Suck it, Jay Leno. You even got me to climb in that thing and work on it. Look at that. Yeah, no, this thing lived in our garage it still does, actually. I can't park in the garage.
Is it on fire in that bottom right picture?
Yeah, no, that's just the light. We're like showing all of the different things. So before we started RetroBlasting, this was Michael's hobby. And the reason that this is no longer Michael's hobby is that this happened because it's so frustrating to work on and own a DeLorean.
So you probably noticed my wrapping paper tube arms. I was so mad that my fist went through the garage wall anyway. So anyway, yeah, it's a very poorly engineered vehicle. Looks cool though.
So this is the Cars of the Stars Motor Museum that used to be in Keswick in England, and they owned a collection of celebrity television and film vehicles. It opened in 1989 and it ended up closing in 2011. And nearly all of the vehicles ended up getting sold to an American collector named, and please forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's Michael Dezer, D-E-Z-E-R. He relocated everything to America in Miami specifically, and he established Cars of the Stars at his Miami Auto Museum, which sounds awesome. That's it in the red there. But then when I went to look that up, and I was like, well, maybe we could go there because that sounds really cool. Apparently, it's now closed as of 2017, and they're relocating to Orlando because he's under investigation for money laundering by the Brazilian government. So, anyway, it's coming soon is what it says. Hey, check this out.
Hey, yes,
We caught up to it.
I did it on purpose, you guys.
All right. So you want to take it away?
No, this says Michael knows this.
Okay. So, and any Ghostbuster fans out there, correct me if I get any of the details on this wrong, but this this vehicle, was a 1959 Cadillac ambulance as built by Miller Meteor Company. They had subcontractors to configure their station wagons.
I do have this information. I thought you were going to tell them about the movie. But you guys know the movie, right? Heard of Ghostbusters, actually?
Wow.
Go ahead, though.
No, take it away.
No, go ahead.
No, I don't feel secure. You've got the notes.
The tail fins were the largest ones to appear on a production car, apparently. They're the same from the 1959 Cadillac Eldorado. The run of this car was very, very limited. They only had about 400 made. And it was a 6.3-liter V8 that was 320 horsepower. So, I mean...
Yeah, and just to give you some perspective on that, they had 400 of these made. You don't see a DeLorean very often, and they think there are still about 5,000 DeLorean VIN numbers in existence of the 6,500 manufactured, and DeLoreans are considered rare cars you don't see very often. So imagine there only being 400 of a car. I mean, this is a very, very rare ambulance. Very rare.
Yeah, so they actually purchased two for the movies, and only one, the converted one, was primarily used during filming. The secondary was used mostly for early pre-modification scenes, so in the movie before they turn it into the Ecto 1, it just kind of looks like a rundown kind of old vehicle, so that's what that was all about. Originally, the Ecto 1, so what you're looking at there in the bottom is a restoration that was done by some fans, because as we will talk about more, Universal Studios being one of the main ones, but a lot of these movie studios do not care about props or about vehicles or about anything that was used in their movies, even though in theory they would potentially be able to make money off of these things. So it seems counterintuitive, but they will just take these vehicles, throw them in a back lot, and just let them be exposed to the elements, and it's heartbreaking. And the fans see it as they're touring Universal Studios or whatever, and they're like, oh my God, what do we have to do? Let's raise the money. We'll restore it, we'll do whatever. It belongs in a museum. It should be in the Smithsonian. Maybe not right next to all the other stuff, but maybe in like a cool 80s wing,
I had the pleasure back in 2001 of going on a backlot tour of Universal. Not the one where you have to stay in the tram. This was more of like a film industry thing that I got to go on. And as we were,
important.
That's not what I meant. I was a student, okay? So anyway, so they're about to give us a tour of the prop department, and the windows overlook the fleet parking lot of the, where all the maintenance trucks and stuff are sitting. And I look out and I see this car sitting on 2 front tires that are rotting down to the wheels and 2 flat back tires with its nose in the air, the grill's ripped off, and I went, those are white wall tires, and that's the DeLorean from Back to the Future Part 3. And I said, can I go out there and look at that? And the guy said, yeah, sure. I don't know why you want to go out into a parking lot. I mean, it was literally rotting down to the wheels, and it took fans years later to buy that car at auction from them and then fully restore it, and now it is the only movie-used Back to the Future car that's in private hands. So these cars are really mistreated by the movie studios until fan pressure gets them restored.
It reminds me a lot of 2001. Last year we talked about that. They found pictures of that thing laying out in a field, the space station that was used in those early shots.
Yeah.
It's just like back at this time period, they would just throw this stuff away, not thinking that they would ever need it or
It
sell it.
happened with the Star Trek bridge, and
Yeah.
I mean, it happened with the Deathstar. A friend of ours has the actual Deathstar from the movie. It was like in a trash can.
Right.
It's like they just don't think about it.
Yeah, the Cygnus from Disney's The Black Hole. They discovered that recently because it got broke by a forklift while moving a Sealand cargo container that was inside.
Yeah.
So,
yes, that car would break down in the middle of shooting the movie too. It's an ambulance.
classic cars are fun.
Yeah.
So this is kind of interesting, and I learned this researching this panel. The vehicle designer for this movie was very poorly credited in the film, and he was apparently he's the person who designed Ecto-1 and Ecto-1A, which is from Ghostbusters 2, and he also designed the proton pack, particle thrower, the trap, the gigameter, the slime scooper, and the slime blower, all within like the first 2 weeks of starting the movie. So I mean, he did all of this stuff, and these are some of his actual sketches. There's a really cool interview with him on YouTube that you can go watch that he flips through. He's a really cool, nice guy, passed away recently, but he has a lot of really cool sketches of the original thing. In the credits, he's listed as a hardware consultant, and they misspelled his name. So it's kind of just like a, but he's a really cool guy and clearly created some really visionary pieces.
Yeah. And you all know this toy. This was the major piece of merchandising from the real Ghostbusters cartoon that depicted the 1959 ambulance in a stylized fashion. So a lot of us had this, probably most of us without its doors after 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So Airwolf ran from 84 to 87, and of course centered on the really cool helicopter there, and it had sort of a Cold War type of a theme that was going on, which was of course really big in the 80s. I don't know what that would feel like. But anyway, so this was created by Donald Belisario, and I think he also worked on another one of the shows that we're going to talk about, but this helicopter features a stratospheric ceiling, stealth noise signature, and a whole bunch of weapons. But what's funny about that is it's based on a Bell 222 helicopter, which apparently was not like a gunship at all. It was just like a regular.
It's just a very cool looking, Pat.
I was about to say, as a matter of fact, I myself and Tim back here, who's running the camera, grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. And hey, good to see you guys. Glad you're here. Represent. But they used that model of helicopter for the medevac helicopter all the time. And my parents worked on the Arsenal, Redstone Arsenal, like they all did. And I had the chance to go out and actually see where my mother was working was right next to the field where they fueled and took care of this thing. So she'd be trying to show me whatever she was working on, and I would just wander over and watch them refuel Airwolf. I was just like, that's awesome.
You can kind of see on the bottom where they sort of just add this little extra pointy up part in the middle. That's a technical term.
It's like the Clark Kent
Yeah, they
and
just
Superman
added all the
version.
pop-up weapons and stuff on it. It wasn't. It was all faked. But the funny part was, and it's kind of sad, after the show was canceled, the helicopter was sold to a German charter company called Hubschrauber Sonderdienst, aka HD, Luftrettung, I don't know, and Blue Helicopter Alliance. And while operating as an air ambulance, it crashed into a mountain in 1992. So the one and only Airwolf no longer exists. It was not saved by the studio, and it was just sold off and then crashed. So there is a replica of this vehicle.
Which is coming up in a minute.
So first we're doing they had diecast you're going to see the name Ertl a lot. Ertl was a big licenser for diecast vehicles from TV, but they had Ertl diecast miniatures of it. But the only surviving replica or the only replica of Airwolf accurate that's ever been made is sitting on a $250 million house in California on the roof.
924 Bel Air Road. And
Yeah,
I know that
this is-
because there is a video, again, on YouTube that shows a video tour of this house, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
you had me watch that. Thanks, I hate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This replica was originally meant for a aviation museum in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, but then the museum closed up. It couldn't stay open because they weren't getting the traffic. And so then some eccentric wacko bought the replica and said, that'll look great on my $250 million house. And so he put it there.
Seems like the Michael Deezer guy from Miami needs to buy this house.
Yeah.
I mean,
So throughout the life of the show, there was only just the one?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
From what we understand, yeah.
So Blue Thunder, did anyone see this TV show? And first, did you see the movie? Did you see the TV show? How do you think it compares to Airwolf? That's the biggest question that we have. Does anyone like this show most of all? I mean, it's got Dana Carvey in it.
That's a plus. Yeah.
The Blue Thunder was based on the SA-341G Gazelle, but it was patterned. It had a custom canopy, a custom sort of add-on cockpit that was decorative, that was patterned after the AH-64 Apache. There were 2 helicopters used for this movie, one for stunts and one as a backup in case the other one was grounded because it needed to be fixed. And they were purchased by Columbia Pictures and flown to Cinema Air in Carlsbad, California, where they were modified. Various tricks had to be employed to make it look fast and agile because the alterations made the helicopters so front-heavy they really couldn't do much.
Yeah, and then after the end of filming, both of the helicopters were sold to this guy, Michael Grube, and he one of them he sold for scraps, essentially. The other one, what did he do with it? Oh, so the other one, he took the parts from it, and so that's the underlying helicopter. They took the shell of this thing and put it on display at a theme park, so you could go sit inside that sort of.
In Russia?
It does. I think it's in Chernobyl.
I think so.
I mean,
Well, then I'll go.
You could go sit there and like have your picture, because doesn't it look cheery? Cool. I love it. But anyway, so yeah, that's
It's like a lovely day in Chernobyl.
every day.
There was a Blue Thunder toy. It was based on the TV show, not the movie, and it came with one pilot. And this toy is actually quite rare these days. It's quite rare and very desired. The last few months, I haven't even seen one on eBay. Normally, you can find one in a few months of anything you're looking for on eBay, and I haven't seen it. I saw it one time at a toy show that I was at, and the last time I saw it before that was literally at my next door neighbor's house when I was 5. He had one, so.
All right. So Street Hawk. This was an interesting. We did a podcast on this and we watched the pilot episode, and it was the first time that I think I've ever seen that show.
Same here.
And it's very interesting. So I have to recommend the pilot of that show just because there's a scene where the guy is there. Jesse Mock is his name, not like my name but different. And he gets in this weird bubble tube, like it's almost like a Luke Skywalker moment from Empire.
I like the back to tank.
Where he like gets into the tank, but instead of it being filled up with water, it's filled up with like suds. It's very creepy and weird. Just for that scene alone, I think you should watch the show. But this motorcycle was designed by this guy named Andrew Probert, who he also worked on the Enterprise for Star Trek: The Motion Picture and Next Generation. He also contributed to the 1978 Battlestar Galactica Cylon Centurions, and he did part of the Airwolf helicopter and the Delorean time machine. So this guy was a huge part of a lot of the designs that we saw. He was interviewed and he was asked whether he was really happy with the way this particular motorcycle turned out, and he says not really, beyond the amazing work that the builders did. Basically, they modified his original concept so much to accommodate their requirements to go from, what they would do is they would go from a dirt bike to a street bike. And they did this thing where the bike would supposedly like elevate
change
itself
its
and change
profile.
its profile, and like sort of transformer-y kind of thing, but it was subtle. This is
subtle transformer.
A subtle transformer. So these are the bikes, because it depended on where he was riding the bike, as which bike they had, and then that's what the actual final Street Hawk looks like. So you can tell they're very dirt bikey, which is not how the bike comes across in the show at all. But the idea of the show is, of course, that the bike can go like the speed of sound or something crazy like that, and that just doesn't seem safe unless you're like maybe like if you have prescience like in Dune or something like that, like, and you can
You would
know-
need prescience for
you
that.
would need that, I think, but
And the fiberglass panels that they put on it to make it look different were constantly just falling off into the road while the thing was,
I was
They
going
would,
to
like,
say, it
duct
would make
tape
it
it back
jump,
together.
and pieces of it would just fly off, and they'd have to cut the camera so that you wouldn't see that on the show.
I think that's probably true of a lot of these shows, to be fair.
Yeah.
I mean, you watch like that in
That's
the
true
intro,
of me. Like, that happens to me when
when you see the Fall Guy truck when it jumps and then it just like hits and bounces, and I mean, even though it's clearly got extra like shocks and stuff put on there, it's got to take an enormous toll. And someone already mentioned the Charger that we will be getting to with Dukes of Hazzard. It's just ridiculous what they put these cars through.
Yeah, so there were no Street Hawk toys in the United States, but they did end up making them under the Fun School label. I think this was sold in India and maybe, don't quote me on Europe or South America, but it wasn't the United States. They weren't sold in the U.S. to my knowledge.
I think the show was huge in Italy, which
Yeah.
makes sense because the Italians use motorcycles a lot more than we do. I mean, to me, fighting crime on a motorcycle seems like a really bad idea. They're gonna hear you coming,
Yeah.
if nothing else. I mean,
Right.
there's no
One of my
stealth.
favorite scenes is still just him trying to creep up on some people, and it's like Family Guy. He's coming up on the side of the building, and you just hear this like just idling. And you know, the people are in there acting like they don't hear a thing, and he's like, "Am I supposed to go in there now?" And he's like, "This is not gonna work."
So this is the Stephen J. Cannell section, and we all remember cool Stephen J. Cannell, where he just sort of like, I'm going to show his picture now. Oh, with his typewriter, and he like takes the sheet off and throws it at the end of the show.
What you don't know is that room was full of typewriter paper just laying everywhere.
Yeah, this is probably the most affordable movie car you can still easily acquire. It was a GMC Vandura, third model from where's my notes? From it appeared in every episode of the A-Team, and third model, and you can still get these. I mean, I have a friend in Oregon who just bought one like for pennies, and now he's turning it into the A-Team van.
Yeah, the hard part is the paint job.
Yeah,
Right, to, like,
and
get
putting that spoiler on the top.
Yeah, you gotta jack up the back.
Yes, but the funny part about this van is that they had one version that had the sunroof, then they had another version for stunts that didn't have a sunroof. It was just a solid roof. So there's episodes like where it's driving by and Face like has to jump onto the roof because they're picking him up from some action scene, and he jumps onto the roof and the stuntman jumps, and you see a solid roof, and then suddenly in the next shot it's in the cabin and Face comes through the sunroof that wasn't there in the last shot.
You weren't supposed to notice that.
I know.
He notices everything.
Yeah. So this is what the van looks like without the cool paint job.
Yeah.
Pretty candy right there on the side.
If you see one of these vans, run.
No, I'm saying go look at it up close and personal because
And as you can imagine, A-Team was merchandised. They had a very small van for GI Joe size action figures. You could pop the roof off, and put all the characters in there. They had the diecast versions. Oddly enough, though, some of the more popular A-Team figures were about 4.5 to 5 inches tall, and they didn't make an official van for those characters, which were the most popular action figures. Yeah. And the A-Team van toys are what created the misconception that the van is all black. The van is actually black on the bottom under the stripe and gray above the stripe, but the toy companies messed that up, and so a lot of people still think it's an all-black van.
I did want to point out that it's really difficult to tell a 1983 Vandura from a 71 or a 95 or any of those year models in between, because they literally did not change the van make or like the style of it for 25 years. So that's why it's so easy to find these. It was not like a specialty thing, so it really is the way to go. Plus, I mean, you can do the whole candy thing and
No.
I'm just trying to look at all options. Anyway,
Hard glass on the corner.
another amazing Stephen J. Cannell production. This came out in 1983 and ran through 86. And it stars Brian Keith as Judge Hardcastle and Daniel Hugh Kelly as the ex-con and race car driver. So on the top, well, actually, no, both of these are the... No, they're not. So the top one is the original Coyote X, which is the car's name. And the bottom was the replacement, which was actually, it's a DeLorean, right?
Yes.
It's,
so in the first season,
they made
it was
DeLorean hideous.
Yeah, the first season it was a chassis of a Volkswagen Beetle with a custom mold based on the McLaren M6 GT with an engine from a Porsche 914. Well, in the second and third seasons, they decided to make a new car, and they just based it on a DeLorean. And on the lower photo, you can tell it doesn't even have the same shaped windshield. It's got the gull wing doors. If you look at the seats and you know anything about Back to the Future, that's a DeLorean with a new body kit on it. And they used that for seasons 2 and 3, probably because they could get those cars cheap around that time, I bet.
Here's some other views of the car. On the left, of course, is the original, and the car on the right is the very weird-looking DeLorean.
Looks like a Matchbox Derby car.
It looks like it kind of like hit something and kind of crumpled a little bit.
Now, the merchandising was model kits and a figure set from Ertl, but oddly, it should have just been called McCormick and Coyote. There is no Hardcastle in that set.
It kind of looks like the car just hit him, and then...
I'm pretty sure they just...
probably why it's crumpled up in front of him.
He's fine. He's just hanging
He's
out.
sliding down the wall.
Maybe he's scared of
you've been
you.
standing in a hallway here at Dragon Con for more than 45 minutes, and you start to do the slide, like... Okay. Does anybody in here remember this show? By show of hands. So I don't.
We
think
struggled finding people who remembered this
I
show.
literally, you guys are the first people I've ever really met who remember this show, who saw it at the time. Apparently, this is Nick Mancuso. He's the actor who plays
Nicodemus.
Ray or Stingray in the show Stingray. He only poses in that. He's only always in that pose.
Yeah.
So you'll know him if you ever see him, because he's just like this, and you just kind of move him around. But
They just pick him up and set him down somewhere else. He's just like, hey.
It was another Stephen J. Cannell, and I mean, just so that you guys know, so this is around this whole thing. It's a 1965 Corvette Stingray. It's not modified at all. It's just a really cool looking car, especially if you like Corvettes and classic vets. But this is just this really kind of weird show where he sort of trades favors for helping people out by solving crimes or doing whatever they need him to do.
He's like a street godfather.
He's kind of a street godfather,
Yeah.
but instead of saying one day I'm going to ask you a favor and you can't refuse, it's not like you're going to have to murder someone. It's more like you're going to have to help someone.
But he's not really clear about that. He's just
doesn't
kind of
say
like,
that.
one day I'm going to call you.
And he says it to ladies, which is really awkward. But yeah, so it's a really beautiful car, and it's a really interesting show, and it's free on Amazon Prime right now. And I'm not being paid to say that, but you should check it out.
There's 2 Stingrays. One of them's a puppet show from the 60s. So
Yeah, don't watch that.
be careful.
If you like creepy puppets that look like Team America, then go ahead and watch the 65 one. This one is from 1985 to 87. So.
Now, I wanted to put Riptide in here because in the midst of all these vehicle shows that were getting so much attention on TV, Riptide just decided to do the trifecta. They're like, oh, cars and helicopters, we'll get one of each, and we'll get a boat. So they put a boat in there, and just to give you...
It's starring Nathan Fillion, apparently.
Yeah, right. So... I don't want to go too deep into this. The car's obviously a classic Corvette, but the boat itself is a 1939 Elko Yacht. that still exists. It's still called the Riptide, and it now operates in Puget Sound by private owners. So
this is what it looks like today. I found this picture from 2017. Port Orchard in near Olympia, actually, is where this person lives now. It went through a weird
emo phase.
A weird emo phase. It was bought by a restaurateur, Howard Johnson, as we all know his hotels, right? He called it the Doho. Listen.
That's hot.
He named it after himself and his wife Dolores, so it's Howard and Dolores. The Doho.
Yeah, it's wholesome.
Still gross, but
Wholesome boat.
In 1950, the gangster Morris Moe Dalitz bought the boat, and he changed it to being called Southwind. And
The Doho Mo?
The Doho Mo. And then moved to Vegas and used it as a hospitality ship. And then it got bought, and these people, they said it was really trashed and everything when they got it in 1997 for $200,000. They spent $200,000 on repairs and redoing it, and so they had this huge binder of like the whole history of the boat and all these cool interviews and all these different things. Like the owners now are like really into the boat, and so they took it. This was at a
I'm on a boat.
This is that boat. I'm just kidding.
Boats and dohos.
Yeah.
Can you feel it coming in the air tonight? No, I know it was bad, but I couldn't resist.
So this one, I love the story behind these cars, because this is the one that I got mixed up with Magnum, because they reached out to Ferrari to try and get Ferraris to be on the show, and Ferrari said nah, and they said, all right, well, we'll just go out and we'll get 2 kit replicas of the Ferrari Daytona to use on the show. And then Ferrari came back around after the show was popular and went, hey, those are fake. And they're like, yeah, we know, you wouldn't give us any Ferraris of any kind.
That's how the call actually went.
Yeah. Hey. Hey. So they said, well, look, they said, we don't want to fake, we don't want fake Ferraris, becoming, famous on a high-profile TV show. We'll give you, some Testarossas if you'll just get rid of these cars. Well, the cars were actually $60,000 kit cars. They weren't cheap even back then. They were really nice. They were built on Corvettes. And they said, okay, and so they gave them 2 black Testarossas. And so the Miami Vice producers had to be different, so they painted them white, because Ferrari didn't offer them in white. So they said, this will be really cool. We'll offer them in white. Paint them in white.
Just like cocaine.
But then they said, well, we got to get rid of the Daytona to get Don Johnson in the Testarossa, and they came up with a way to do that.
How do I know these are gonna go bang? You worried about that? Yeah, I think that's a reasonable concern.
I love this guy. He's in so many things.
Look at his face.
Where's this going?
I was like, wait, I don't. Hey.
The black blast.
Here comes the best line. Here comes the best line. Here comes the best line.
So.
Oh, that warms the cockles of my heart.
You're evil.
So yeah, Miami Vice, they did have model kits. I didn't see a lot in the way of diecast cars. Maybe I just didn't find the right research. But they did have model kits. I think they might have had, remember those diecast cars that actually had a key? And you could like lock the door underneath with the big key, like the real size key? Yeah. I think maybe they had something like that, but don't quote me on that.
It seems weird that this show, because this was a huge show for kids even though it's about drugs and prostitutes and horrible things that children, but so was Rambo, and we had a cartoon for that. So I'm just saying, it seems like they would have had a toy line, but
they didn't have a toy line.
No, but it seems like they would have.
So G.I. Joe gave us Chuckles instead. Poor substitute.
Wow.
Just sore.
So I gotta throw out some numbers here because this is just insane. And I grew up with this show, but there were between 256 and 321 1969 Dodge Chargers used on the run of this show. Okay, yeah,
Do you notice
it's
a
starting to
difference
be
in numbers?
it's sobering, right? So less than 20 still exist, and on average, more than one Charger was destroyed per show, on average. To the point that when they were filming a jump, they would have to ballast the front end of the car so that it wouldn't, go wonky or whatever when it was going over, so it wouldn't, or ballast the back so that it wouldn't nose over because of the engine. When they started running out of Chargers in Southern California, they hired a Piper Cub to go flying over neighborhoods in the highway looking for people driving them to go make them an offer on the car. It got that bad. And then when that started to dry up, they finally just said, well, we'll make models and shoot them out of air guns for the later seasons for certain jumps.
Oh, boy.
And apparently that amused John Schneider and Tom Wopat to no end. This is hilarious.
Yeah. I was going to say, maybe we could just shoot Coy and Vance out of there, too. I hear from your laughter that you've seen the show. This is a Glenn Larson production, and it's a very weird show. So the guy...
10-year-old boy.
No, but when you rewatch it now, especially if you've never seen it, it's surprising with the directions that it takes. So it's Lucy and Desi's son, Desi Arnaz Jr., who is sort of like the main character who's over in the passenger seat there. And then Automan, the first truly automatic man, as we hear in the...
automatic man.
You can tell that it looks like Tron, and there's a reason why. So they basically had, I guess it was the folks who made...
Yeah, the producers of Tron.
The producers of Tron made this show, and they were like, well, we just like this idea so much that we're going to make it into a cool vehicle show. And he basically is like, he comes out of the internet just like in Tron.
Or that computer.
Okay, well,
He's
I'm
a computer
say
program.
Yeah.
He
comes out of the network.
He lives in the memory banks.
He comes out of the computer of the 80s. And Desi Arnaz Jr. is sort of this goofy, nerdy kind of guy. And when they get into all these scrapes and things like that, he just walks inside Automan. And Automan envelops him. So basically they merge into one. Do you see why I'm saying this is a little weird? I mean, no, it's fine. Okay.
There's a great conversation. There's a great conversation at the very beginning of the first episode when he first programs Automan, and Automan comes out of the computer, and Desi Arnaz Jr. is all surprised, and he's like, "You've done an excellent job. I'm perfect." And he's like, "No one's perfect, Automan." And he goes, "No, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being perfect, I'm an 11. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, they had this car. It was a
Lamborghini Countach.
yeah.
And they put Tron stripes on it.
They had several. They had a motorcycle, and they had sort of an airplane-looking thing too. But these were the two most common. So that's the Lamborghini. I'm sure we've all seen the Lamborghini Countach. All you guys know.
Oh, yeah.
Have to know what this car. And then the helicopter doesn't really look all that special. But then they just do this really weird, very simplistic line around it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It kind of looks like my neighbor's Christmas decorations.
It does really.
My neighbors are cool.
It
Yes.
was. Yes, sorry, I should have said that. So the very first episode is hilarious because Desi Arnaz isn't the best actor, Desi Arnaz Jr., but so he does a lot of physical acting in the episodes. He's literally flying around. He flies into the back seat, and he clearly just jumps into the back seat because the car is like turning 90 degrees. Automan doesn't move. He's just driving like
because he's
normal.
perfect.
And he's like up against the window of the car, the side window. It's just.
And bless his heart, he won't put his seatbelt on. He just won't do it.
It was the 80s. We didn't have to wear seatbelts back then.
Yeah.
I would if my car was turning 90 degrees.
Seems like it could give
I'd
you
wear
a
2 seatbelts.
concussion. You know?
I keep putting them on. Never.
The Fall Guy.
The Fall Guy is the premise of The Fall Guy, if you've never heard of this, is it's Lee Majors from $6 Million Man fame, and he is a Hollywood stuntman that spends his non-Hollywood working hours when he's not being a stuntman. He's a bail bondsman, and he's out to find people that jump bail, and he goes after them with his duo of friends. And he drives this truck, and of course, with every 80s television show, somehow this otherwise normal truck became a character in the show, and it does all of these absolutely insane jumps in every episode.
Which is kind of okay because he is a stuntman.
Yeah, he's a
so
stuntman,
it's a
yeah.
nice premise that Glenn Larson or whoever came
It's
up
just in
with.
the 80s, there was always a convenient incline somewhere so that you could get where you needed to go.
Yeah, I'm pretty.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he sings the opening song. Right?
Yeah.
And ladies, please go listen to the lyrics of the song if you haven't heard it in a while, because it really doesn't hold up well. Real awkward. I mean, it's fun, but.
Fall Guy's truck actually had a lot of merchandising, model kits, diecast cars, motorized cars, and even an action figure set, just like McCormick and Coyote. So.
All right.
Oh God.
So,
Okay.
I'm really, really pleased that some people in here have clearly seen this show or heard of this show. You can't really find this show to watch. I mean, there are a few muddy, soupy episodes on YouTube.
She turned this on, and the first thing I saw was video, telescene credits, and Howie Long, and I went, no.
So the idea of this is that it's sort of Mad Max and Knight Rider combined. It's sort of like a weird post-apocalyptic, but it just looks like LA in the 80s. And I don't really know what that thing is supposed to be. It's a big semi-truck that the top of it like opens up and there's a helicopter, but they have to drive the thing inside the cockpit of the helicopter, which seems like you'd have really bad visibility.
Everybody, thank you so much for coming to this panel. If you liked it,